I'm Andrea, a passionate DEI advocate and consultant on a mission. Join me in each episode as we celebrate diversity, ignite conversations, and craft workplaces and educational institutions where everyone thrives. This podcast is my commitment to making a meaningful impact on the world of diversity, equity, and inclusion. So are you ready? Let's get Diversifused. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Get Diversifused podcast. I'm your host, Andrea Horton-Mericli, founder of Diversifused DEI Consulting and a passionate DEI advocate and ally. This episode is all about unlocking everyone's potential and celebrating neurodiversity in education and the workplace. My guest speaker today is Meghan Bonde. Meghan specializes in supporting leaders to facilitate inclusive, transformational learning and development to accelerate innovation in their diverse teams. As a creative, empathetic, and courageous leader, she has influenced thousands of leaders globally through her facilitation of transformational learning with a focus on celebrating neurodiversity. Meghan creates meaningful change and unlocks the potential of individuals and organizations alike through her Grow Top Talent program. As a lifelong learner, she is most proud of her leadership successes within her amazing neurodivergent family. So, Meghan, welcome to Get Diversifused. Thank you so much for being a guest today.
Oh, thank you for having me. I'm excited.
I'm excited too. I can't wait for this conversation. So, why don't you tell the listeners a little bit about yourself, your story, and what it is you do?
Yeah, so I have been an educator my entire life. I started as a child helping my mom grade papers and staying in for recess to help my fourth grade teacher put up the bulletin board and file papers. And I became a speech language pathologist and went into education, really helping support neurodivergent students who learn differently. Maybe they were identified as ADHD or autistic or dyslexic, different speech, language, and communication differences. And I quickly realized that the students had many strengths and that the biggest area in terms of problems was really the system and the environment and how education was designed, and that it really needed to be more inclusive. And so I shifted into more leadership type roles to look at ways to lead change and create more inclusive learning for students. And then that transferred into staff and leadership type professional development and inclusion initiatives. And then I found out my kids were neurodivergent, and I noticed that a lot of the characteristics were familiar to me. And so I decided to get identified and found out I was neurodivergent. And I was just shocked because I had been this expert teaching everybody about it and supporting learners and leading change around it, and didn't realize that I was neurodivergent. So that's what brought me to really being a support for organizations to create really inclusive learning experiences for the adults and systems. Because at the point when I realized I was neurodivergent, I realized that my needs were not met. And I wasn't able to really thrive in the workplace as a neurodivergent leader. And I really want to take my experience and knowledge around neurodiversity and inclusive transformational learning to organizations to really help retain top talent, attract top talent, and make sure that their diverse teams are thriving.
Wonderful. I love it. I love it. And that's one thing that we never do is most people don't self-assess. And I taught special ed and all. I don't think I'm neurodivergent, but you never know. I tend to get distracted very easily, but I have not gone to go get tested. But I have a very close friend who was misdiagnosed most of her life. as bipolar and manic depressive, and she ended up being on the autistic spectrum, and she only got diagnosed in her early 40s, finally got diagnosed, I should say, in her early 40s, and it just made everything click for her. She thought back throughout her life, the struggles that she had in education, as a student, and she also became a teacher as well. So she was a brilliant, wonderful woman. And it's interesting how, and not just people who've been misdiagnosed or diagnosed late in their lives, how individuals, humans, are able to adapt and see, find ways to do things that work best for them to get the result that is the desired result. And when I taught special ed, a lot of my students, I was a dyslexia interventionist on the campus in middle school, at the middle school I taught at, and one of my favorite students had struggled all his life with dyslexia, and it took his mother fighting the system to get him tested. I saw some of his early writings, and they were like hieroglyphics. As a first, second grader, he finally got diagnosed in third grade, and she had noticed something as a mother very early on. I think even before he started school, maybe pre-K time, and but he developed all these strategies to overcome the challenges so he could learn and remember things and kind of, I wouldn't say cheat the system, but do what he needed to do to get where he needed to go. And I mean, it's just a shame how, not just in our educational systems, but our workplaces, as you found out, being finally diagnosed as an adult, that the accommodations and services that individuals who identify as neurodiverse need to be successful in the workplace are missing, because they're hidden disabilities, and so they're not the obvious to most organizations. Can you hear me? Did I lose you? Okay, I wasn't sure if I lost you because you got really still.
Most of it.
Okay, did I lose you?
Yeah, it froze for just a sec.
Okay, what was the last thing you heard? Yes, I can hear you. I thought you were just listening very intently, and I'm thinking, wow, I must be very passionate. But what was the last thing you heard?
I heard everything, and it just cut out really briefly where I can put it together still.
Okay. Technology, gotta love it. Right, listeners? So, so I find your story very fascinating because it's very relatable. And not just for those that identify as female, it's very relatable to all adults and individuals who do have a neurodiverse diagnosis, and because they know the struggles, and individuals who are advocates and allies for individuals with neurodiverse or any type of disability can empathize. And it just shows, it gives us even more reason to continue advocating for everybody to have the accommodations that are needed for individuals to be successful and happy and productive and innovative, and so people can grow. So you sort of answered my first question about what inspired you to focus on neurodiversity. So my second question that I have down is, can you elaborate on the concept of GROW interviews and how they contribute to designing transformational learning experiences for neurodivergent employees?
So I developed the GROW interview protocol to really have a system for inviting critical thinking and reflection on the part of the neurodivergent employee, because many are not necessarily self-aware. I wasn't self-aware. I didn't know so many people are not identified or late identified due to a wide range of factors.
Mm-hmm.
And so to really invite a conversation that could happen once a year, stay interviews are starting to happen at many large corporations where it's a system to ask people questions to help them with retention instead of just waiting for the exit interview. And
Yep.
grow interviews are a way to go deeper into retaining people, but with a real focus on their learning and development so that they're really thriving. And they're structured in a way that the questions invite a lot of depth and really can uncover invisible strengths, invisible needs. And once we interpret kind of what is underlying some of the responses, can guide some simple, small adjustments to routines and everyday learning type opportunities to really make it more of an inclusive culture for everybody. And one example is regular weekly team meetings. There's so much time spent in those team meetings. And a lot of times people think of learning and development, they just think of a formal training, but learning happens at those team meetings.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a real opportunity to have some collaborative transformational learning routines and adjustments built in. And small tweaks to those meetings can really skyrocket a team to be much more high performing, innovative, and learn from each other and grow just from information that can be gathered in a grow interview of the team members.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, people don't realize how important those team meetings and one-on-one meetings with their supervisors are, because it is a time to, especially the one-on-one meetings, it's a time to kind of self-reflect and have those intimate, crucial conversations to that the individual may not feel comfortable opening up about or talking about or mentioning in a team environment, but is more comfortable in a one-on-one environment. And with those team meetings, I love the fact that leaders can encourage people to grow through, rotating, leading the meeting, or giving data, or elaborating on what they're doing, talk about their job, because especially in today's society with a lot of hybrid and virtual work, there's a lot of teams that work together but don't necessarily understand everything each other does, unless it's a pretty much the similar title and job. And so to give employees or team members, I should say, the opportunity to explain things and answer questions and all that, that's another way of inviting innovation and creativity to the team, because they may get input on how to even do their job even better, or get added, I wouldn't say added tasks, you don't want to inundate a worker, but they may think of other processes as a team, so things can be more streamlined. And everybody can grow, not just the individual, but the team as a whole, and success and just general growth overall can happen. So I love that the growth concept of growth interviews, and I'm so glad you mentioned stay interviews as well. I wish more organizations were getting on board with this, because stay interviews let the employees know that their voices can be heard and they're valued, and that boosts up employee engagement and retention and growth too, because if an employee's wanting to become a leader, they may not have expressed it directly to their supervisor. Maybe they have, but the larger an organization, sometimes communication falls through the cracks. So that supervisor may have told somebody, but it may have stopped there because people get busy. And and so those stay interviews can be very important for professional development and growth opportunities as well. So I love that some organizations are starting to do that, and I wish more would. But yeah, so
Absolutely. There's also such an important need for people to learn how to grow within roles,
yes,
because many
yes,
neurodivergent people may not want to get promoted to what is the traditional next step of being a supervisor when
yeah,
they've become a real expert at their job. It's such a
true.
different skill set, and
Hmm.
everybody deserves to grow within their company and gain salary increases and be learning and get challenged with new
Hmm.
things. And it may
Yeah.
look differently for neurodivergent employees. And so having a grow interview really uncover some of those pieces can be really critical to retaining top talent, rather than saying, well, they don't want to be a supervisor and go to the
Hmm.
next obvious position, but that doesn't mean they can't continue their growth.
Exactly. I'm so glad you brought that up, because uh, not everybody has the same goals, has the same desires, or is comfortable with the same things. And it's not that they can't do it; it's just that they're comfortable where they're at for the most part, but they also want to continue to grow professionally in their knowledge and skill set as well. Maybe they want to be a more lateral move, but they also deserve what's called salary increases as well. Maybe not a promotion, because maybe that's not what they want, but definitely salary increases when it's due. So
Mhm.
that's a very good point. And so thank you for bringing that up. So speaking of leaders and supervisors and growth, how can leaders effectively design inclusive curriculum and teaching strategies that cater to the diverse cognitive profiles of neurodivergent individuals? What are your suggestions?
The first step is to really know your learners. You have to understand who they are and build a relationship. Any good teacher knows that there is no learning happening without
Mhm.
a relationship and understanding who they are. And so the grow interviews are a great way to start in a structured way to get some questions that really kind of get past how is it going, who's in your family, very surface level stuff, what are you interested in learning about, goes deeper. The other thing to think about with inclusive learning is to really think about low floor, high ceiling. And that
Mm.
means that there's learning tasks and opportunities that have a low floor, meaning they're really accessible to everybody, that there's an entry point where everybody can participate and kind of bring some knowledge and start engaging. And then the high ceiling part means that there's an opportunity to go deep and complex so that people who need challenge aren't going to get bored easily. There's also thinking about things like depth and complexity symbols. So, this is
Mm.
a strategy that's used in gifted education that's actually good for all learners, because it
Mm.
really invites people to think in a deep way about a topic and
Yeah.
really look at it from different angles. And there's visuals that go with it and questions and prompts so that it can be a routine to think
Hmm.
about a topic or a situation from an ethical standard. What are the big ideas? What are the multiple perspectives? What are the trends and patterns we are seeing? And
Hmm.
so those are some inclusive learning strategies. Another one is cooperative learning structures that allow people silent think time and then offer time for them to process verbally with one other person or in a small group, or to make their thinking visible by jotting things down on sticky notes or into graphic organizers. So just giving people different ways to process. And it's really about universal design for learning. It's about thinking about how are we making things adjustable in how people are learning, the content of what they're learning, and how they show what they're learning.
Yeah.
And when we provide options for different ways and build in opportunities to try different ways so people can even see, oh, this worked really well for me, this didn't align as much, that's how they gain self-awareness to be able to advocate and say, this worked really well.
Oh, I really like that low floor, high ceiling. I made note of that right now. But I love how you went back to like teaching strategies, because even though we're no longer in school, we're employees now, we're still humans. We're still learning. Life is learning, and nobody learns the same way. We're complex creatures, so it's always best strategy to teach with or teach or give professional development using all learning styles and and different activities, because for many people it's a hands-on learning thing. Like, I learn better by seeing and doing. Hearing, not one ear in, one ear out the other. So I'm one of those that never took, would not rely on my notes in university, because when I was writing, my hearing stopped and I would hear things incorrectly. So I was one of those that had recorder and then listened back, and I could play it back numerous times because I'm not an auditory learner. And so being aware of all the different styles of because unless you have one employee, where it's just you're going to need variety if you're going to have success, and you need to be very flexible. So I love the as I said, the low floor, high ceilings, and also step one, getting to know your team. Be present, have a presence, even if you're at the top level. Show yourself, walk around. Knowing somebody's name is very powerful, even if that's all that all you can remember of your 500 plus employees. Who knows? Even if it's just seeing it on their badge, if you guys use badges at your workplace, acknowledging and addressing somebody by name, it has a huge impact. And being present and being seen does as well. So I love that that's step one, because that's where the trust component is built on, because we've all been in situations where if we don't trust someone, we're not going to fully rely on things that they say or that they're trying to show us, because we're going to wonder, like, is there a hidden agenda? Are they really telling me the truth? Are they leaving something out? So, and I don't know how it is for individuals who identify as neurodivergent, if they probably individuals probably think the same way, but thinking that with the trust issue. But I think it might even be step one, might even be more important for individuals in neurodiversity, especially if someone's on the autistic spectrum, because it's all about individuals on the autistic spectrum, from what I know, and correct me if I'm wrong. That's where they need that's where they're most uncomfortable, is the human interactions and all, and responding to social cues and facial cues and stuff. Is that correct? Or
so there's a wide range of what different traits can present in autism. So in some people that's true, and others are hyper aware and hyper empathetic, especially women, and that's often why they don't get identified till later. But I think that you're right in that it can be more important with neurodivergent people to focus on that trust and relationship building, because oftentimes they've been in systems that weren't designed for them. They've been sent messages both explicitly and sort of implicitly that how they're wired is not ideal, that there's something wrong with them or there's problems, that deficit focus through school and families and other, community organizations. And so when you've been sent those messages for your whole life and you're now an adult, it is going to take longer to build trust and be in a space where you're ready to be vulnerable. And learning is vulnerable. Part of learning is making mistakes and shifting and taking risks to work through challenges. That's where the learning and growth happens. And if you have those types of microaggressions from being in a marginalized identity where you haven't really conformed to what's considered the neuronormative standards, then there's more work to do there to leverage those people's diverse strengths.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember teaching special ed, and you're right, that trust thing component was huge because they've been individuals who have different types of hidden disabilities are labeled as lazy or hyper, or they don't care, they don't care about this. They just care about themselves, or their or bratty or emotional, or a combination of all the above. And it took every school year, you would get new students, and it would take some time and to lay that groundwork, to lay that trust. And they, I mean, of course, as humans, not just children, but as humans, we test the waters, how, for consistency, for fairness, for are they really going to do what they say that they're going to do, or is this a pushover? Can I am I the one really in charge? So they test the waters. So yeah, that getting to know you is also important to show that consistency, to establish that consistency, and show it gives the leaders an opportunity to show that their fairness across the board, or lack of in some instances. So and just establish that communication. And the more they show up, the more they're seen and present, the more comfortable individuals are going to start to be, and not just individuals who identify as neurodivergent, but all staff. Well, the more comfortable they'll be with the leaders walking around. They won't feel like, oh, they're checking up on me. They don't trust that I'm doing my work. It's their time to get to know the team and to show them that, I'm approachable, I'm available, if you need to talk or tell me something. And so, yeah. Let's move on to the next question. I'm loving this conversation, by the way.
Me too.
What are some common challenges faced by neurodivergent individuals in educational settings and work settings, and how can these challenges be addressed through inclusive practices?
I think some of the challenges are people masking and trying to mold and fit in to what they think they're supposed to be. And we really lose out on their unique strengths and their unique viewpoint. And they're not thriving when that masking happens and when they're kind of hiding and holding in their natural tendencies, interests. And that causes turnover, it causes burnout, and it just causes underperformance. And so we really need to make sure people feel like they can be their full selves and that we're celebrating their unique strengths so that we're retaining people, they're thriving, they're reaching their potential and contributing the innovative ideas and being a part of an inclusive team. I think the top strategies to be able to really combat those challenges is to really start talking about it and do trainings or provide learning opportunities for people, and just make it obvious that it's something that you're ready to learn about and be a listener. And a lot of times leaders don't get started on an inclusion initiative around neurodiversity because there's fear. They're not going to do it perfectly. They're going to make mistakes and do it wrong. And the important thing is to get started and be a listener and ask the questions and be vulnerable yourself that you're a continuous learner and that you don't know it all. And I think asking people questions and finding out information and having those discussions is a great place to start to show that you want to, move forward and make a more inclusive environment, and you're ready to take one step at a time.
I love that, because it is important for teams to know that when a leader shows their vulnerability and lets others know, it's like, I don't know everything. I can learn from you. I'm always learning as well. Life, as we said before, life is learning. Nobody knows everything. And ask those questions. Step out of your comfort zone. Have those uncomfortable conversations and crucial conversations, so growth can happen on both ends, both sides. And you had mentioned something, and it sparked something in my mind, and I should have written it down. I say, in one or out the other. It's just that to have those trainings and everything for the teams. Neurodiversity is one of those hidden disabilities that I can see can make people uncomfortable. Oh, and I remember, and both sides, like the individual who has neurodiversity is afraid to be labeled, to be judged, to be treated differently, and the organization may be afraid that they might miss something or do something wrong and be sued or something, and lose that employee and other employees. And from what you had said about the masking, that's what it was. That's for everybody who has some kind of marginalization. If they can't be their authentic selves, then, as you said, they're not going to be 100%. If they can't be their 100% authentic self, they're not going to be 100% productive as like they can be, and creative and inclusive. Because some of the ideas they may have, because they're masking, they may feel that those might be judged too. Like they're going to think I'm stupid. This is a dumb idea. I'm not going to say anything. Or they try to say something, but they keep getting spoken over, or not included in the conversation. And so then that's when they stop participating. So it could go that way too. But yeah, masking is a big issue when it comes to all marginalized populations, including neurodiverse populations. It's a shame that people still feel like they need to mask in today's time, and that it happens. As humans, we tend to, for lack of a better word, fear and be uncomfortable with anything or anyone that is different from, as you had said earlier, the norm, what we think the norm is, and or should be, or has historically been. And there's just so much education that still needs to happen, because it's not happening in as much as it should in the educational systems, in the community at large. And there's a lot of wrong information on the internet. The stories that tend to get out are the ones that have a disfavoring light, those that tend to go viral, And it's a shame that happens, but I wish there was more good Phil stories that went viral. And it's just education. When people educate themselves, they need to go to different sources, many different sources, not just one. And so, and I'm digressing, I know, but I tend to do that in my podcast. I'm sorry.
No
But
need to
it's just
apologize.
as my thoughts keep going, it's just education as a whole needs to be improved, and not just for teaching our kids and our adults how to treat others, but even when it comes to history, it needs to be changed. We need to teach accurate, factual things so we can learn from them and grow from them, and not repeat some of the things that have been happening in the past. But yes, with
So
that,
true.
let's go to our next question. All right. So, how can organizations foster a culture of inclusivity and celebrate neurodiversity in the workplace?
I'm feeling really hopeful with the exciting things that I'm seeing a lot of organizations doing around looking at their recruiting practices to see where are they sourcing candidates from to actually focus on attracting more neurodivergent people because of all of the unique strengths. Looking at their hiring practices, adjusting from the traditional interview, that maybe that's not the best way to find out somebody's skills, changing their job descriptions to be focused on skills and really specific to help attract people to even apply, rather than putting something like good social skills. What does that
Yeah.
even mean?
Mhm.
Who's defining what that looks like?
Yeah.
People are starting employee resource groups and affinity groups for neurodivergent people to have community and have a voice within organizations. There's just so much happening, speakers and trainings and workshops happening, the stay interviews. There's just a lot of hopeful things to create more inclusive environments. Another thing that I'm a part of is the Colorado Neurodiversity Chamber of Commerce.
Oh.
And organizations from across the nation are joining. You don't have to be just in Colorado. It's the only chamber of commerce of its kind that's really focused on neurodiversity in the workplace. And they're providing really amazing learning opportunities for organizations where all their employees can have access to the information to really just bring to light that there are already neurodivergent people at your organization. You may not know it, and here's some adjustments that you can make to make it more inclusive and then attract even more.
Oh, wow. I had forgotten you had mentioned when we previously spoke that you were part of the chamber. And so anybody can join that chamber? That's
Yep,
fascinating.
absolutely. Mhm.
Wow, that is fascinating. And I love that they have those neurodiversity programs. I'm actually going to start looking at my local chambers to see in Pittsburgh to see if they have such programs too. I know that they're starting to branch out with different trainings and services. So I'm curious to know if that's one of the things they're now focusing on. But
Yeah,
yeah,
absolutely. It's a great
and
place to connect
yeah.
workplaces to the ideas.
Yes, yes, definitely, because chambers are made up mainly of employers
Hmm.
and entrepreneurs and all. So it's they're the people that need to hear that. And so
Okay.
I'm glad that the Chamber of Commerce in Colorado is doing that. I hope more chambers across the country and across the world. I don't know if there's Chamber of Commerces in other countries, but I hope that they start branching out to offer different diversity initiative type programs as
Yeah.
well. I love that you brought up in answering the question the inclusive recruiting and hiring practices. and from interviews from job applications on up, because wording is very important. The employees that are looking, or the individuals that are looking for work, are getting younger, or I won't say younger and younger, at least to me, they're getting younger and younger.
Yep.
You're not old enough, the newer generations are starting to, or the later generations are starting to apply to for employment now, and these initiatives are very important to the younger generations. That this is one of the main things that they look for is diversity practices, and they look at the who's on the boards, who's on the leadership. If it's all just one color, one gender, it's a turnoff. And
it is.
And they also look at the programs that the organization has for their employees as well. You had mentioned ERGs and affinity groups. My last company was the first company I was at that actually had an ERGs, and I loved it. They were still expanding on their ERGs, so it wasn't all encompassing, but they had some, and it was lovely to sit in on them and be a part of them. And I wish more organizations would jump on board with it, because it's important for employee engagement and satisfaction and feeling like they belong and have a voice. But it's also important for leaders to be a part of those ERGs and affinity groups. If it's just the frontline staff that's participating in them, they're eventually going to fizzle out, because they're going to think that it's not important to the organization, when in fact it's almost like a supporting structure. These ERGs should be a supporting structure for the organization, because as all leaders know, or most leaders should know, a happy employee is a productive employee, and is an employee that stays. And they have a network of their own, and they can say great things, or they can say not so great things about their experiences. And word of mouth is very powerful when it comes to branding of organizations and reputations. So ERGs and making sure your employees are happy and have the accommodations they need, and with that, feeling that your team feels heard and valued, so they can come and be their authentic selves, is very important. So
absolutely.
Yeah. Definitely. So I just love that you were a former teacher, just like I was, and speech therapist. I was like, oh, I wasn't a speech therapist, but that's just such a fascinating field and occupation, because you do get to work with children and adults sometimes, from all walks of life and all different types of backgrounds, and all different types of disabilities too, visible and invisible. And it's just it's a way to grow as not just a professional, but a person too, because you get to see the challenges that some individuals do face, and it can make you become more empathetic and as a person, which is very, very important for diversity, DEI.
Yep. And you get to just know people who are different from you. And so many people think speech therapists only focus on the actual talking and articulating of sounds, but it's anything to do with communication, and there's social communication, and how we connect and interact, and how we write to communicate, and how we hear and listen to information. And so that those skills that speech language pathologists have are really great skills to bring in terms of knowledge for an organization to understand neurodiversity and the different ways that people communicate, and not focusing on what they can't do or what they have trouble with, but focusing on the strengths that they bring.
Exactly. I'm glad you mentioned that, because a lot of people don't realize that there's all or they know, but it doesn't dawn on them when they think of speech pathology, speech language pathology, that there are many different ways to communicate outside of speaking. So, which is very important, the speaking part, but sometimes that can't happen. So there's other ways to communicate as well. So awesome. So is there anything else that you'd like to say to our audience today before we start wrapping up?
I just love if they would connect with me at growtoptalent.com, because I offer a private podcast mini series on how to do a grow interview. And you can even just try it for yourself and interview yourself and ask yourself these questions about your own learning and development, and imagine what it might feel like if a leader were to ask you those questions. And think about piloting it with somebody and trying it out and seeing what impact it could make, to take a little bit of time to really be a listener. So I just love to connect with people, and I'll also be able to update people who are connected with me on when my TEDx talk comes out, which should be here pretty soon.
Yes, tell me more about this TEDx talk. That was going to be one of my after you mentioned some stuff, I was going to say, so how can people contact you? But yeah, tell me more about this TEDx talk that's coming up. Tell our listeners a little more. So, I mean, don't give the whole thing away, but like, when's it coming out? What's the topic?
So I don't know for sure when it's coming out, because it does take time to finish the editing, and the TED organizers really do fact checking before it gets posted. And so it can be a wide range of time. But the topic is really about understanding people with rainforest minds, which is one type of neurodivergent mind. And the idea is really around how to thrive at work, because it's common for people to have gifted burnout or identified gifted. And the rainforest mind is one type of gifted mind, and kind of explains that type of burnout at work, and ways gifted people can thrive who have a rainforest mind.
Oh, wow. That just sounds fascinating. You need to let me know when it does come so I can put an update in the podcast summary as well. But even if it's like months later. But yeah,
I'll keep you updated.
Thank you. That's one thing we forgot to mention was the gifted mind. And they do tend to take on a lot, and they can, and it tend to, I wouldn't say tend to burn out, but yeah, it's they demand a lot of themselves, I should say, most of the time. So yeah, I cannot.
It's another neurodivergent identity that often gets forgotten as a different way of thinking and being than neurotypical. And on social media, there's over 350 million follows on hashtag gifted burnout. So we know that it's a big problem, and companies need to be paying attention to this area of neurodiversity too.
Yes, because I wouldn't say we've all been there, but everybody knows at least one person that has burnt out, or is about to burn out, or is extremely stressed because they take on too much, and demand perfection from themselves, and which just adds to the stress and burnout. And part of me thinks my husband might be one, but their mind is always going, and they have a hard time stepping away and relaxing, and sometimes even sleeping, because their mind is always going. Hence the burnout. So yeah, I cannot wait for that TEDx talk.
Thank you.
Oh man, you're welcome. All right. So is there any other way individuals can get a hold of you outside of growtoptalent.com, if they want to invite you to be on their podcast, or just speaking engagement, or if they want to reach out to you for your services?
That's really the best way.
Okay.
I also have a speaking website on teamneurodivergent.com. But the best way to stay updated and connect with me is growtoptalent.com.
All right. So listeners, I will be putting Meghan's contact information for the growtoptalent.com, as well as the title to her upcoming TEDx talk on a slide at the end of the podcast. So, and it'll also be in the summary as well. So before we go, let's talk about some key takeaways from today's wonderful and powerful conversation with Meghan. So we talked about understanding neurodiversity. We explored the concept of neurodiversity and its importance in creating inclusive learning and working environments for individuals with diverse cognitive profiles, including gifted towards the end, those with autism and dyslexia as well. We talked about inclusive curriculum design. We talked about discovering talked about the significance of designing inclusive curriculum and teaching strategies that cater to the unique learning needs of neurodivergent individuals, fostering a supportive and empowering educational and work experience for everybody. We talked about transformative learning experiences. We talked about the innovative Grow interviews method developed by Meghan Bonde, my wonderful guest today, which is aimed at gathering insights to design transformational learning experiences that accelerate innovation and success in diverse teams. And we talked about leadership in neurodiversity. We talked about the role of leaders in facilitating inclusive learning and development initiatives and the importance of it too. And celebrating not just developing initiatives, but celebrating neurodiversity and unlocking the full potential of diverse teams. Some possible next steps for learners, our listeners. I'm stuck in the learner and educational mode here, sorry. Some possible next steps for our listeners. Reflect on the current learning and development initiatives within your organization and identify areas where inclusivity and neurodiversity can be further integrated. Explore resources and training programs focused on neurodiversity and inclusive education to enhance your knowledge and skills in this area. If you find one, bring it to your HR team, see if they can bring it to the organization as a whole. Engage in dialogue with colleagues and leadership about the importance of creating inclusive learning and working environments and advocating for the implementation of inclusive practices, not just in doing, but also in writing. And consider implementing the Grow interviews that Meghan developed, or similar strategies to gather insights and design transformational learning experiences tailored to the diverse needs of your team members. Thank you so much, Meghan. Is there any other key takeaways or possible next steps that you have for our listeners that I failed to mention?
I'd just love to come speak at their organization and continue on the path of really celebrating neurodiversity. And I love to think of it as neurodiversity is as important to a thriving organization as biodiversity is as important for a thriving ecosystem.
I love that comparison or that analogy. I love it. Because you're right, it is. Because there's so many people that have not been diagnosed or have not let others know about their diagnoses. So it's very important. All right. So with that, listeners, that's it for today's episode. This episode will be airing. When did I tell you it's going to be airing? On April 11th. There we go. We'll be airing on April 11th, 2024. So if you're listening, it's already April 11th, 2024. But I will be marketing this episode as stating such. So I look forward to hearing you listening to our next episode as well. So thank you so much. And remember, stay diversifused, everyone. Talk to you later. Bye. Now go out there and make a difference. And as always, for more strategies on building inclusive workplaces and communities, check out Diversifuse. We're here to guide you on your DEI journey. Make sure to visit our website at diversifused.com and follow us on social media for the latest happenings, blog posts, tips, and events.